The sun is shining, guys. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Emma. This year, 2026, is the year where I'm choosing to prioritize active reading in my life again. And the reason being, at the end of 2025, I fell back into love with reading. So I wanted to take you guys through the story of how I fell into love the first time with reading, fell out of love with it, why it happened, and how I fell back into love with it again, and why I'm choosing to be more intentional with reading this time around. So without further ado, let's get into the video. My journey with reading would probably have to start all the way back when I was 1 or 2 years old. Even since back then, my mom had always understood the importance of reading in our lives, and she would take my brother and I aside to read to us bedtime stories, even when we didn't know words or could read ourselves. I have an older brother, and he was the type of kid who would nag my mother to read him the story again one more time, please, mom, even though he may have heard the story hundreds of times before. But I was quite the opposite. Whenever my mom tried to put a book in front of me, I would try to push it aside. Even though that was the case, my mom never really gave up on reading or trying to create this habit of reading with me and my brother. This process happened quite naturally with him as a kid who always loved books from the get-go. But for me, it wasn't until I was maybe 5 or 6 years old when I started becoming more and more interested in books. And this was because at that age, my family moved to Australia for my dad's job, and I was put into ESL school for first grade. Back then, I had zero concept of English, and my whole class was made up of other kids who also spoke zero English. And somehow within 6 months to a year, our teachers were able to push us up to a level in English where we could go mainstream, which is basically native level to an Australian 5 or 6 year old, and we could join the rest of the kids in their regular classes. I mean, there are two things, right? The first thing is that, wow, in 1 year in a native environment, you can get up to speed really quickly. But the second thing, which I think is arguably more impressive, is the fact that my teachers could handle a class of zero English, despite the language barrier, despite the cultural differences. So honestly, mad props to our teachers back then. I still have very fond memories of my teacher.
Special things to show you from the junior IEC. So we want everyone to listen. I'm going to sing you 4 of their favourite songs.
Hello everybody, my name is Louise. I come from France.
Country you come from?
Turkey.
Where do you come from?
I come from Vietnam. Miss Bobby, I come from Sri Lanka. We went to the preschool. I come from China. I come from France. The silkworm hatched in spring. First they were very small.
We were assigned a lot of graded readers every week, and we wrote a lot of book reports, simple as it may be. But outside of class, my mom also took the initiative to get not 1, but 2 library cards at the local ACT library. Every week or so, we'd borrow 20 or 30 titles of books. We'd spend hours after school in that library, and hours at home as well, immersed in bedtime stories. And that was when my love for books solidified at the age of 6, I want to say. And even though we left Australia when I was 7, I took with me my love for books everywhere else that I went. I'd be that kid that would hang out in the library to read. And it was a great way for me to experience more that this world had to offer outside of my local environment and whatever school had to offer back then. I was drawn to a lot of the fantasy series, so think like Percy Jackson, The Mortal Instruments, Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, and this was pretty much the case up until high school. So at the end of my freshman year of high school, I had to prepare for a standardized English proficiency exam, and the grades would determine whether I could go abroad one day for sixth form or college. And that particular summer, I read so much in preparation for this particular exam, and by the end of it, yes, I got the grades I needed. The price I had to pay for that was to fall out of love with reading, which in retrospect, I could have been less extreme, less gung-ho about this test preparation process. Did I stop reading after that? No. I still had to read because of assigned readings in my high school class or in college. There was absolutely no shortage of those. I barely ever read for fun afterwards. And even if I did, reading always felt like a chore. Fast forward a couple years, I'm 20 now and I finish university and I come back to Vietnam, and as luck would have it, I'm offered a gig to tutor none other than the exact same standardized test that I took 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, it's not very surprising. It's a very common test now. If you come from a country where English is not the national language and you have to prove your proficiency to go abroad, you would be very familiar with this exam. I continued to teach that for the better part of 4 years, which was when I connected the dots and I realized that if me taking the IELTS when I was 14 was the reason why I fell out of love with reading, I probably should not be teaching other kids this test, because if it wasn't good for me, then why would I want that for someone else, you know? And now we fast forward to October 2025. One of the students I had tutored science to a couple years back reached out to me and asked me if I could tutor her IELTS test prep again. And my first reaction was to say no, but there was something in me, a little voice in me that wouldn't let it go. And I knew that if I didn't take her up on this, I would regret it. And so I said yes, and we did a crash course within a month so that she could get the grades that she needed to go abroad in this month actually. We did start with test prep, but 2 weeks in, my student was like, Emma, I've noticed that a lot of my peers in class aren't reading and I'm seeing the rise of illiteracy, and I do not want to be a part of that, even though I don't love reading myself, but I'd rather read than be illiterate. The first book that she wanted to read was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which is a literary classic to understand race and segregation in 20th century America. And I was like, sure, we can start with that. And a part of me was a little hesitant because literature was something I felt like it's not my thing at the time, but I did remember a couple of assigned readings from my time back in uni, and they were classics that were to be read no matter what. Those include books like George Orwell's Animal Farm or 1984. Yes, To Kill a Mockingbird as well, things like that. I start deep diving into this realm of contemporary literary classics again, and also finding supporting teaching material, PowerPoint slides, presentations, discussion questions, and all of that. We did go through a couple lessons of learning literature, but then she took her exam and she had other responsibilities to tend to, so we kind of stopped. But by that point, I had already gotten in way too deep into this literature rabbit hole. You couldn't get me back out. I had fallen back in love with reading. And the ironic thing that I realized was that IELTS was what took me out of reading back in 2014. Yet this time round, IELTS, as proposed by my student, was what got me back into reading. So in retrospect, perhaps IELTS was never to blame in the first place. It was rather my attitude towards reading that was really the problem back then. So anyways, what changed this time around was that I approached reading a lot more actively than I did before. I'm using my critical mind to kind of assess how much I agree or disagree with the opinions brought up in a book, or the plot, or what values I want to take in or not, that type of stuff. I feel like I'm getting so much more out of the reading experience. There are books I read back then that I knew that I loved, but I could not tell you why I loved them or the details of those stories. And I look back at those titles and I'm like, man, I really should reread that again. And that happens to be the case with many books. So had I been more active with my reading, I probably would not be here wishing that I could reread all of those books all over again. Now I really take my time with reading. I try not to blow through books like I did before. I'm asking myself questions. I'm looking at background information on the author and the era that the book was written in to get more of like a context of the society back then, which was something I guess I no longer did after I left school and no one really made me read in that way anymore. And then I remembered that I have free will and I can make my own curriculum now if I so choose. And since October 2025, there has been a couple of occasions where people had needed to gift me things. And I always say you can gift me a book. Either gift me their favorite book, or if they didn't know what to choose, then we would choose something that I wanted to read. And for me to think about that one day I will have a bookshelf filled with books that were gifted to me from people that I really love and care about. It's like whenever I open up that book to read, I will always remember exactly who, when, and why it was gifted to me in the first place. And yeah, I just think that's a beautiful thing. This is my current read, The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. And these days I've been reading before I go to sleep, and it's been a great way to wind down after a day of like working on the computer. This was a gift to me from my best friend for my birthday. Dan Brown is one of my favorite authors, and I knew that I wanted to read this book even without knowing what it was going to be about. And turns out that it is a book that explores consciousness and where that exists. Does it exist purely in the brain between chemical reactions? In which case it means that consciousness would die when we die. But the book presents a different approach to consciousness, that maybe it exists elsewhere, outside of the physical or tangible realm as we're able to decode it. I'm only about like a third of the way through the book, so there's still much exploration left to be done. But one thing I really like about Dan Brown's novels is that all of the artwork, artifacts, symbols, and documents in this novel are real. All experiments, technologies, and scientific results are true to life, and all organizations in the novel exist. So it's presenting scientific evidence in a very digestible, thrilling way, you could say. The other thing I love about it is the fact that this book is set in Prague, which is arguably one of my favorite cities in Europe that I visited when I was maybe 10 or so. So it's been a hot minute, but I still have very vivid memories of Prague. And so this book is right up my alley and hits all the right spots, which brings me to the themes that I want to explore with reading this year. The first being consciousness. Like, what are we? Are we this body, or are we consciousness? Where does it lay? Does consciousness die with the body, or does it continue to exist elsewhere? You know? The other theme is human nature. What are the common points that, I guess, tie all of humanity together throughout the ages? The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And I feel like you could explore this through literary classics. There's a reason why classics have become classics. There's a reason why it has resonated with so many people from that particular era, or is so representative of a certain period of time in history that has warranted it the status of being a literary classic. These classics probably illustrate like certain patterns or archetypes in human nature. For me, my belief right now is that we are essentially consciousness, but we express human nature. And I really want to see how closely aligned or misaligned consciousness and human nature actually is. Other reads such as Sherlock Holmes, Notre Dame de Paris, Les Miserables, and I also really want to dive into the Arabian Nights, which is a series of folk tales from the Middle East, which is a place to me that feels very mystical, very unknown. And I think there's much to be learned from that civilization as well. The thing I love about reading is the more you read, the more you learn about the world, the more questions you have, and the more you're aware of how little you know in the grand scheme of things. Hence the saying, the more you see, the less you know. One of my favorite quotes, period. And before, I used to be really discouraged by this, by the fact that, oh my God, I'm learning so much, but there is still so much left to be learned. But now my attitude has shifted more into, wow, there is still so much left to be explored. It will be an endless adventure. I will never be bored. There will be always something new to learn. And that is the attitude with which I am bringing into reading in the rest of my life in 2026. And I think it's going to be a great freaking year, you guys. Ooh, I recently came across a really interesting journaling prompt, and it goes something along the lines of, if 2025 was a chapter in your book, what would the title of the chapter be? You guys know what to do. Be sure to drop your answers in the comment section below. And my follow-up question to that is, what would you like for your 2026 chapter to be called? For me, my 2025 chapter would be called Chaos and Core Memories. But I have the feeling that 2026 is going to be called the Dream Chapter. From my end of the world here in Hanoi, I'm sending you guys lots of love, lots of good intentions, going into this new year, exploring and becoming your best self. The Dream Chapter for you as well, perhaps. Thank you again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!